Okay, we are now live.
Can we hear them?
I don't know. Can you hear us?
Yep.
Great, fantastic.
All right.
Okay, we are now live.
Forgive me. Is there an agenda attached to the invite?
Yep. Great, fantastic. Yes, there is. Sorry about that. I'll just shoot it over here in the chat.
That would be helpful. I don't know why I don't see it. But... Okay. All right. So it is 10:03 on Thursday, June 26th. This is a meeting of the Cultural Vitality Committee Subcommittee, who is reviewing the Arts and Culture Assistant Program guidelines and information. And I do acknowledge with respect that we are in Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory, and that the land in which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and known as Bawading. Bawading is the home of Garden River First Nation, Batchewana First Nation, and the historic Sault Ste. Marie Métis Council. Moving on, anyone today with a declaration of pecuniary interest? Just let me flip my screen here. Okay, seeing none, we are looking to next adopt our agenda for today. So we don't have any minutes to approve. Is that correct, Alicia?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. So looking for someone to move and to second. Thank you, Miranda. Thank you, Lee. The adoption of today's minutes. Any further discussion? Today's agenda, my apologies, today's agenda. Any further discussion, changes, additions, deletions? Being none, all in favor? Approval of today's agenda. I can't see Lee's hand. Thank you, Lee. That's approved. Thank you. All right, so we're moving on to our discussion today, and I think it would probably make sense, Alicia, that you guide us through this document that you've provided based on some of the work that we've done so far, or that's been done so far, and let us know how you want to proceed here and what kind of progress we can make today. Can I just, for clarification, are we, what time do we have until here today?
I think that we have until 11 is what we've scheduled, but again, I think based on everybody else's schedules as well, I just appreciate you all meeting.
I have carved out until noon if needed.
So, until when? Sorry?
Until noon.
Okay. I can only do till 11:15. So that will be the hard stop, obviously, because without all of us, we cannot further discuss. Okay, Alicia, take it away, please.
Okay, so looking at the application, the guidelines that have been updated, just based on the discussion that we had, I've made some adjustments to the document. I started to model it so it looks somewhat like the Green Initiatives policy. I would have circulated the versions, but they became illegible very quickly. And so the information is for the most part still here, but it's been consolidated a bit. We talked about keeping the introduction and purpose, the reference to the policy on the first page, definitions, incorporating some definitions. And then I was going to ask for some help with respect to just some feedback on how we wanted to determine what the definition of capital expenses was versus operating costs, operating grants, project grants, how we wanted to do that. So that's not really a conversation. Well, we can have it here, but in the interest of continuing through the document and then maybe kind of looking back on it as a whole, just note there have been some adjustments made, but we don't need those answers immediately. Looking into this in terms of the process for evaluating applications, that's been added in a more succinct area. There's reference to conflict of interest, accountability, monitoring, reporting of results. All this information appeared in the original guidelines, but ultimately in a different order and maybe not together. So we're trying to provide applicants with an overview at the beginning with as much information as is relative to them as possible as they try to assess if this is a relevant fund for them as a whole. And then those further adjustments to the information and streams comes later in the document We're moving over to again, page 4 of the document. We had some reference of ineligible expenses for all grant streams. I haven't made any significant changes there. I've moved over the exclusion for all grant streams. I think it was at the back of the document to the front. Reference to confidentiality of information. I think this some of this appeared within the old ACAP guidelines. It's also a bit of a reference to the Green Initiatives guidelines, again, for confidentiality, how it gets, we'll say, distributed through the department for discussion if required, through staff. Moving forward, so that's all standard is what I guess I'm trying to say. In terms of the submission dates, we had some pretty significant questions about when the submissions and the intake should fall and how many we should have. So I didn't make any significant adjustments to page 5. I thought it was still up for conversation, and didn't want to spend any extra time there until we had a more set path forward and through our discussions. Moving on to page 6 of the document, we start to look at the different types of the program objectives, which we decided was important for us to contain and still have contained in this document. Again, some adjustments for eligibility. So regardless of the amount, looking in the middle of page 6 under program objectives, the second paragraph, regardless of the amount requested, the project must have a distinct start and end date specific to deliverables, different pieces. And this appeared in the old set of guidelines as well. We had talked about consolidating the small projects into 2 streams under projects, or 2 separate funds under projects, as small projects and events, and versus large projects and events, because I felt maybe that was more encapsulating of what we were looking to do. If I've misunderstood that, let me know. But ultimately, I think the only significant change here is that we'd be looking at adjusting the priorities under each of these to make it fit for inclusion of the events under it. So here, the adjustment that was made here that wasn't captured in the comments on page 6 is amounts requested under 5,000 to a maximum of 100% of the project budget for small projects and or events grants, where that number would normally be 2,999 under the current guidelines. And this is more inclusive of the community events grant application stream that currently exists. So that's something to note here, I think, of adjustment. But beyond that, again, the applicant must, those pieces are relevant and included. And then I have more questions if we were to go this route about the large projects and events grants. Again, so the amounts that I've indicated here under large projects and events on page 7, amounts requested between 5 up to 15 for a maximum of 75% of the budget. Are we still in agreement about that? Do we want to see that change? Does that make sense? Is 5,000 too much, too little? Those are the questions I have here for the most part, because most of this is relevant from the existing ACAP guidelines. Something of note we talked about in the meeting last month, was that we wanted 2 years, looking to the middle of the paragraph of large projects and events on page 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bullets down. We had it indicated in the last ACAP guidelines that we wanted organizations to be in existence for 4 years is what was referenced. We talked about 2 years, if that for operating. I'm not sure if that's relevant here or how we want to adjust that or make it consistent across streams, if that makes sense to or not. We'll leave that up for discussion. Moving forward, it's just a lot of change in terms of how it's laid out. But ultimately, I believe that the most of the information still is here. Moving into page 8, we look at operating grants, and we can start talking about the numbers here. Again, like if I wanted to check that we're still good with a maximum, so operating assistance grants not exceeding a maximum of 25% of the projected operating budget. Seed funding is still possible, but we're going to add information about that under operating, was my interpretation. And then looking into it the same way it's laid out, the project and events grants are laid out. It's the same type of thing, just following format. And we had kind of left off at assessment criteria. And I've included some information about a diversity component, and that's very much up for debate, and it's in a very, very early draft stage for that conversation. So that's where we have gotten. But for the bulk of the conversation, if we wanted to continue, if we wanted to spend more time with the document outside of this meeting and come back with more feedback, if we wanted to move forward and finish the rest of this document from where we were before, we could start at assessment criteria on page 10. And sorry for that.
Okay, so question. I am slowly reminding myself of the vigorous discussion we had the last time, and lots of good ideas. And I want to just know, so what's in, I'm reading it on this screen beside me here. So what is in yellow? Is that something we changed? Like, what does the yellow represent?
That's where I would like some clarification. So certainly committee discussion as we move forward. I mean, no surprises. I don't think this is something that, even with the information that we get here from the committee today, that we finish quickly. I think this is this is next step in the process. So there's still time to amend, but it helps give us an idea of where we want to go. So if there's more research to be required, I can go ahead and do that and come back again.
Okay. So I would suggest, and if anybody disagrees, please say so, that we would continue going through the entire document, and so that we can get like one complete review of the entire document. And so I'm seeing here, you just mentioned, I think it's page 10 and what I'm looking at, which is starts on assessment criteria. I think we should go through and finish looking at everything. And then, and I personally was not really registering too well this morning. I should have brought with me the notes I had from the last time, because I did, just for my own like recollection, although Alicia did a great job of reminding. But I would suggest we start here in terms of that, go through till the end if we can get there. We've got like 8 or 9 pages to go. I can see clearly that because we didn't have definitions before at the beginning, correct? So I can see, and that I'm, first glance at that, it seems to be reading well. It's like, here's what we do. Here's the things you need to understand when you're reading through this document. And then, so it's coming together nicely from my perspective. And then just one last thing. Let's just have an informal, please don't ask if you can speak. I think we can all pay attention to who might have something to say and jump in at the right time. And we don't, I think let's just have a good discussion, just like if we were in person with a small group of people. And so Alicia, can you take us through this first section here under assessment criteria? Does anyone?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Jumping in. So I think that what Dawn is suggesting sounds great. Definitely starting from that part of the document. I just want to mention that I have feedback on the document up to this point that I'd like to send to you after this meeting, Alicia. I'm wondering if after we go through the rest today, if you're planning to send us an updated version of this document that we can then further review and comment on. Okay. Awesome. Yes. Then I'll make sure I get my feedback to you just after the meeting to include that in.
Out of curiosity, would anybody be interested in working in a Google Doc? So I was just going to ask that. Yeah. Because then we could real time see each other's feedback and comments and proposed edits, and then work on it together. Yes. So if that's of interest, I'm happy to provide either this version, at least this hard copy, and other versions in Word, but I'm also happy to do it in Google, allowing for people to track their changes and thoughts. And would that work for everyone?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. If we're allowed to do that, that's great.
I think we're good. I think we should be careful about replying back to each other within it. So if you have questions, potentially I could consolidate them out and circulate it to the group for as information.
Right.
So
and
we don't tag questions at each other within the document. We just provided it. Yes. Cool.
Yeah. Well, I want to be clear about that too. I don't think any of us would be actually editing the document. I think we would be using the comment feature to make suggestions about, right? So none of us are going to change it, but we might say if this was whatever, as long as we're good on those guidelines, and we're allowed to share, and we continue to follow the rules, then that's great. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Lee, before we move on?
No, that was actually a Google document was my recommendation.
Okay.
Well.
And I would like, if it's possible, I would like to hear. So if we could let's see if we can get through the document. But I would like to hear from Miranda, like what her comments are, if possible, if we have time for that, just to have those in my head as we go forward. Okay, assessment criteria, here we go.
Okay, if it's okay, I'll just jump in with, so the existing assessment criteria, options 1, 2, 3, and 4 are what exists currently without changes in the ACAP guidelines. I didn't want to make any changes or edits without further conversation. Addition of the, sorry, say column number 4 or criteria number 4, diversity. We can call it something else, of course, but this is in reference to wanting to have this as be part of our rubric. So this is just the beginning of that conversation. I was going to say that most of these, I had a hard time finding any other pieces of documentation from other municipalities or groups where this existed that I had easy access to. So this is relatively, to have its own category, I think it's very novel and good.
That's good. That means that we're
ahead of the curve.
Yeah, ahead of the curve. Yeah.
And I'm pleased about that too. That being said, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but certainly when I was looking for it, I wasn't able to find it easily and accessibly and openly. So if there's other information later, I'm happy to have it. I see Miranda. So that being said, the rubrics that are on page 10 that are linked within the document and not available here, those have not been changed, but in looking at the bottoms of page 12 and 13, where it says diversity, there's a draft, a very early draft for consideration as to how this might look on the existing rubric. Some notes is that we do capture a level of diversity as we screen and adjust within the community impact criteria, but at the same time, not to the level that I think that we're looking to do, that we'd like to move and expand into. And so that's all that I have from there. Otherwise, I'll leave it to you.
There's a lot here too. I think my first thought as I go through this is, could we all as a group think about some of the challenges we've had in applying this criteria that maybe could help us think about, because off the first glance, as I read through this and think about it, I'm seeing things that are not currently potentially provided as part of an application that are part of criteria. So as an example, there was a clear mandate, competent administration, demonstrated use of consistent board governance practices and effective governance structure. I don't think there's any, from my recollection, I don't think we have any type of information that's required within our application to support as one example. There's another one down here in community impact, appropriate marketing and publicity plan in place for its activities. I think there's a number of things, and I don't think that means we should remove them, because I think personally, I think all the criteria that are here are relevant. But I don't know how we would assess them, because we're not asking for that information. So thoughts about that, guys?
There is a section for promotion in the application that I recall, and I know that I would scan it in the timeline kind of matrix to see if they had marketing as part of that qualifying factor, and built into the timeline. But I do agree that if we could pre-screen, again, if there's some way to, essentially they can't submit the form until all the areas have been completed. Yeah, like, not to sound harsh, but I think we're gonna have a hard time maintaining and recruiting review members and committee members when we have 700, 800 page agendas of applications, and we have to spend 20 minutes trying to figure out something that wasn't clearly defined in the application itself, only to find that it doesn't even exist or wasn't included, right? So I think I like the thinking is that each one of these assessment criteria should have a home in the application in some way. If we're assessing for it, there should be a question related to it. So that's just my comment, I think.
I'm just trying to think from a technical perspective, how we better do that, because I think in some ways, the question has evolved over time. So looking back at previous ACAP applications in particular, there was a significant portion where we asked for people to include like their metrics for media in particular. So again, like, so how many views, if you're putting out a news release, how many views essentially would you get? That being said, like, we're all at the mercy of essentially of what our media partners tell us in terms of those views. Like, we don't have ability to do that. If some people have established websites, some don't, but I digress. It's like part of the details, right? So I guess the point is, like, that has changed over time, and now because it's changed the way it has, I think it's giving us an incomplete picture of what we're asking, and the bar isn't particularly high in that area. So I see your face, yeah. So I know what you're saying. I'm thinking that I was just talking with communications, and I'm hoping that our next iteration of this, we can move towards an intake system like a Google form. So that will deal with the issue. And if it does not, we'll have to talk about what the standards are for what do we consider incomplete is the problem, because that changes, like, I guess subjectively from group to group, who will consider what being the most important parts of the application. So yeah.
Miranda, do you want to add anything at this point?
Not right now. Thank you, Donna.
I think also, as I look here, I think some of these bullets are, and maybe this is a loose way of like, these are things to be thinking about and looking at or whatever, but I think there's a number of things here that that some of the smaller, especially the smaller projects or the individual artists, it may not be applicable to them. So for example, well-chosen and highly appropriate collaborators, volunteers, and community partnerships. Well, I don't think we've seen, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, if we went back and looked at that grouping of 20 or whatever it was, 27 small project requests, a lot of those things are people working on their own and looking to, they may not have volunteers, they may not have community partnerships. They are individuals expressing themselves in whatever art form they've chosen and is their passion. Demonstrable positive impact in the community, stimulating economic development and cultural tourism opportunities. Well, that's a very important bullet. However, it would be very difficult, once again, for things that are on the smaller side to demonstrate positive impact and stimulation of economic development and cultural tourism. So not to overthink it and not to overcomplicate it. And I'll just leave it at that. I think you know what I'm saying. Yeah, go ahead, Miranda.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think too, we need to, like, part of that is going to be just streamlining the bullets and changing the wording a little bit to say things like as applicable, if applicable. The other thing is that if we're asking for the moon on a spoon in a fairly short application, we need to be mindful of how much we're asking people to tell us about this. So to a degree, it needs to be relative based on the project, yes, but we also need to be realistic about how much information we're requesting and going to get, and also how much information that might add to the review process. So again, I don't really have an answer at this point, but just something to think about building off what you said, Donna.
Can I propose possibly a process that might help us through this? Is yes, we can review it as part of the Google document and provide some proposed edits that way. But I think once we get to the application side of things, I have a feeling that in order to stay true to that, if we're asking it, then we should assess on it, and vice versa, right? If we're assessing on it, we should ask for it and it should be provided. So I'm thinking that if we do another kind of review of just these bullet points, once we get to that application amendment, then we can eliminate, we can combine, we can say, okay, this application, the goal was to make the application shorter, not longer. How do we get this information in a more shorthanded way. Like I feel like we'll have to look at it holistically in a way in order to make both clear.
In some cases, it does say here, you know, following criteria will be considered for incorporated organizations. I mean, I know of incorporated organizations that, to my knowledge, while they have a governance structure on paper, they don't use best practice. They don't have board meetings. So if we're going to ask for it, then we better, I guess, be consistent or whatever. Sorry, Miranda, were you going to say something? I jumped in.
Again, just building on what you're sharing, we need to be really clear on what we need to be able to make a good assessment. Like, what do we really need to know? Do we really need to know all of this stuff? Yes, it's good to have it there so people can include it, but what do we actually need to be able to make a good assessment? Only requesting the data that we actually need. Yeah.
So with those things in mind that we've discussed so far, are we looking to change anything here, or are we looking to just note those things that we have noted that I'm sure Alicia has written down? And are there any other, I guess, general comments? I don't think we're about to wordsmith this section of the page right now, right? Of the document. So, you know, is that God, I hate when I say that. I'm trying very hard to stop saying things like sort of and kind of, because you either do it or you don't. So would we have those as notes that when we go back and we're getting more into the words that are there, though that's an overall guiding principle, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I don't want to guess either. That would be an overall guiding principle. Ask for what we need and be sure that if it's in here, we have a method by which we are getting the information, asking for the information.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. Sorry.
Well, I'd like to be that's kind of the point. Like, I'm sure you don't want us to sit here and wordsmith.
No. The thing is,
every choice, right?
I think that when we do that, it just opens up a can of worms. Like, whereas that's like that's something I'd like to see, I think, in reflected in the Google, if there are any thoughts or specifics. And that way I can then publish it with the minutes of this meeting, and have it there as a record of what we went through to get here, along with these, which will be included with the next minutes of this meeting and all the things.
Right now, our job is to take a chainsaw to this. Later, we're going to pull out the chisels, and then we're going to get the fine sandpaper.
For sure. I'm thinking without trying to, so like, I don't know, even with the adjustments, we've made this a 13-page document. Like, well, so I mean, that's not what I had intended, to make it the same or longer, but I think it is more concise now, at this point as we move forward. So I think we've made some pretty significant moves. I don't think that there's any disagreement about the assessment criteria still maintaining a project feasibility or organizational health. I think we can break that out if it's, again, like a small or large organization. I wonder, should we be doing a separate, we're on page 10. Okay. Should we be looking at assessment criteria posted under each stream? No. I mean to say, like, so the thing is, in terms of large and small, because it changes. I know.
Could we not put a caveat within each if it applies to large and small? Because I feel like a majority of them apply to both.
Yes.
And there might be just a single word or if applicable or a
happy to hear this. Yes.
You could just, it's as easy as saying relative to the grant stream.
Okay, perfect. That's great. Like I said, being concise makes me happy.
Sorry, I had such a strong emotional reaction that I was like,
no, I love that. That's great, actually.
I did have one comment about the diversity review. I love it. in the broad strokes, I would say pull out the priority groups, and then
Yes.
you have in something traditionally underrepresented, call it all priority groups. Those are already defined in the city, put them in the definitions on up front.
Great. I'm happy to do that. I want you to know that I was pulling from the existing ACAP where that was relevant. So I wasn't sure which language we wanted to go with, but I didn't identify it here. So thank you. And
Yeah,
I'm
I would
happy
just say
to
call
work-
it priority groups, define it as traditionally underrepresented groups as identified by the city of Sault Ste. Marie, cultural plan. This is the list. And that way, if we ever need to update it, you're just updating the definition. You're not going back and
Yes.
pulling every piece out. Oh, Miranda. Great. Oh, yay.
Yes, just yay.
The other thing to, as Miranda said about some of these, where applicable, as relevant, etc. There is another way of keeping things here, but without requiring them specifically. It could be, what's the terminology that it would say? Something along the lines of, this is not the right one, but you're going to get the gist of it. Preference will be given, or to applications that have well-chosen and highly appropriate collaborators, volunteers, and community partnerships. I picked one. It's not relevant. I'm just saying that you get more marks if you do this. You don't get as many. It doesn't mean you have to. It just means it will have, your application has more value. That's what I want to say.
I really like that, Donna, because I feel like I didn't necessarily, I couldn't define it, but that's how I was. The ones that got 15s were ones that did stuff like that. So that's perfect.
The deluxe criteria.
I'm writing that
Tick
down.
all the boxes. Okay. Is there anything further within the this assessment criteria section that we want to discuss?
For me, I'm okay. As like the notes will come at a later time to be shared. In terms of the rubric itself, I didn't really want to get into the conversation of opening up these rubrics today, because I think that just kind of muddies the water, as we haven't determined what diversity looks like under our assessment criteria, so it doesn't help to apply it here. But this is generally what it might look like on page 12. Like, number 1, poorly defined partnerships. Number 2, okay defined partnerships, that kind of thing, and moving forward. So I think for my purposes of note taking and development here, we can probably start over at the beginning, and if Miranda were comfortable sharing, we could probably head back that way.
I'm comfy with that. I just also want to say, before I jump into these comments, these are things that came to mind as I was reading. I hope I don't sound cranky, and I hope I don't sound like a squeaky wheel. But I can give you some of the high points of what I wrote.
That'd be great.
Well, not cranky at all. We're all, I think, very to the point people. So I think we have a thick enough skin to take it, Miranda.
And in saying these things, like if I am incorrect in something, if I've got the wrong idea about something, I'm very open to correction and dialogue. So, all right. So my comments, let me just see here. Many of these that I'm seeing tracked in the document are things that Alicia popped in. I noticed a few pieces that were incomplete, so I just noted that, recognizing it's a really draft document, and I won't go into those. Big one is under definitions with regard to eligible applicant, and point 3 where it says individual cultural producer and practitioner. There's a really good working definition of arts professionals that the OAC has used, and I think it's encompassing and also succinct. And so in the comments that I've left in the document, Ali, I've put the link to that specific page on the OAC's website for you, and you can take a closer look. But yeah, the defining what this is can be kind of slippery and complicated. And then you're getting into questions and discussions around what does professional mean. So I think the arts professionals definition lays it out quite slickly and nicely. And then underneath that eligible project, it notes within a specific time period, and I'm just wondering if we should clarify this further, if the expectation is that projects will be subject to a one-year term across the board. But that's an item for discussion later. The definition for capital expenses that you pulled up there, I noticed that you're referencing the Arts Council of Manitoba, but it also aligns with the Canada Council's definition. A thought that I had is, yes, we could just totally disallow capital expenses, or, and this is just to put this out there, we could allow capital costs related to the project up to a certain cap. So for example, capital expenses integral to the project are eligible up to 10% of project budget, or to a maximum of $1,000, whichever is lower. I just feel like this might be more accessible and accounts for those specific items of equipment that might be needed to make a particular project happen. So like, for example, purchasing a specialized piece of artistic equipment whose usefulness may extend beyond the project, but is absolutely integral to making this specific special project happen. I also found a note on the University of Guelph's webpage. I know we're sort of crossing sector lines there, but they lay out some fund definitions in their finance section that I think might be helpful as far as defining different kinds of funds, including capital costs. The operating costs, I was glad to see that you had pulled the Canada Council's definition there. We might also want to put in a category, and again, the Canada Council has a great definition for this, relating to direct project costs, just to offer a clarification between what we're calling capital, what we're calling operating, and then what we're calling direct project costs. It'll be helpful for us as we're adjudicating the grants. It'll also be helpful, I think, to applicants as they're writing. Is this too much, or is this good? Good? Okay. So then just, oh, go ahead, Donna.
I just wanted to pause just for a second. If I recall from our last meeting, there was some discussion around capital and whether or not we should allow it, because this often could be abused. And then there's like the general computers, cameras, like frequent things that people try to petition for that then become a personal use item. I don't know if we ever rounded out on a decision on that, or if we're allowed to make a decision on that.
I think we are allowed to make a decision on that for sure. I have some thoughts just based on what I've seen come in over the years, and where the conversations I've had with people, maybe applicants who haven't moved through the process. I hate to say it because I'd like it to be very clear and cut and dry, but I think there is a need for capital expenses up to a certain threshold. I like that often, I think it gets a little bit murky with artists in particular, like with the definition of artists and the things and resources and tools, because those things are so interchangeable. And sometimes I've noticed they've been allowed by the committee and other times they haven't been. And that's because there hasn't been clarity in the guidelines. And again, different groups and fluctuating priorities of different like say group members and what have you, like as those conversations come to fruition. So I mean, I think that there is a requirement for that within this, but I mean, I would love to say no to capital just to make it clear. But I think for smaller things, I certainly don't have a problem with that myself from what I've seen so far.
Like I'm thinking like under 1,000
Yeah.
and less than 10% of the project, like something like that, like a nice solid cap, so that it's like, what I keep thinking about was a specific application that wanted a $5,000 recording booth when you can get a $200 mic and a really nice like kind of setup. Yeah, it's not the Cadillac, but we're not the Cadillac committee. We're not the committee that you go to for the Cadillac, right?
We're not?
No. So I think that's what I'd like to see too, because I would hate to stop someone from making something fantastic because we won't supply that one tool funding.
And I think about, sorry, was it the Quilters Guild? Was it last year? I've made this reference before, but again, it's about an air purifier for the space so they can continue and expand what they're doing. It's technically capital. It could, if they were to vacate that space, they could take it with them, they could sell it. I don't think that's what's happening here based on the, I guess what's the word I'm looking for. It's the frugality of the request as well. It was like, can we, it was, yeah, the way that it was positioned, it's just, sometimes you can tell that it's coming from a very sincere place, whereas not to indicate anything we've talked about today isn't, but that there are some that are a little bit more, that are more padded in different ways, I guess I'll just say. But again, talking about the fact that none of these groups are again, very resource wealthy is typically what we're dealing with. So I like keeping this open.
We're on capital expenditures and capital expenses in the definition. Is that correct?
Yes.
So if we have a cap, which I'm not disagreeing with, but if we have a cap of $1,000, about 50%, if not more, of those line items can come out of there. Unless you're saying it's a cap of $1,000 and there's, partner funding or whatever. Nobody's getting a vehicle, that's going to run for $1,000, right? So or land or building or renovations or anything like that. So I think we should think about if this list, while I appreciate that it's a definition there, if we are putting a low cap on it, it's intended to contribute, right? As opposed to pay entirely for potentially or mostly. I'm sure there's some artistic tools that would fit in a cap like that. So there's laptops that would fit within cap like that. But I guess if there is that cap, then some of these categories wouldn't be relevant.
I agree. It would shorten it up a little bit in a good way.
I agree too. And to admittedly, I've been looking at this through the lens of working at an organization and recognizing that sometimes you need these things to be able to make a project happen. And probably, thinking a little bit naively about how people might exploit that. But I'm confident that if we keep it in there and we add a cap or some kind of up to a certain percentage, whichever is less, kind of caveat on it, then we can still make sure that we're offering some support as we can, but that it's not becoming a dominant element in what we're offering support with.
I also think we'll see that as well in the applications, maybe not within the first round or year of them, but as we move forward, we will see certain trends in the data as well. I think that'd be clear.
Not to add more, but I'm wondering, this brings up a really important element in the assessment criteria on project feasibility on page 10. If we can just make note of putting something in about efficiency, efficient use of funds, reasonable use of taxpayer dollars, however we want to say it. Because I think that without really putting that in the assessment criteria, that was all of our gut reactions when we saw these big ginormous requests, but it's not fully captured in the assessment criteria.
I have one more piece of feedback to share at this point, if you want to hear it. It's not about capital funding.
Go ahead.
So underneath the process for evaluating applications, I just want to note, and this is where I come in as being a bit of a squeaky wheel, I really would like to look at the way other municipalities handle their grant adjudication processes, because to me, it still feels intrusive and counter to other paradigms of application review processes that I know of, where these discussions and deliberations are held in camera or through closed door sessions, and materials aren't posted publicly and the deliberations aren't hosted publicly. It's not because you want to be sketchy and hide things, but for the privacy of the applicants and also just for the quality of discussions. It's nice to be able to speak a little bit more freely about and have a more generative conversation about things. So with all due respect, if we could look into that, that would make me feel good.
I'm happy
There-
to do that.
There could be, for everyone's protection, there could be, so sometimes, and I don't know, I mean, this is not on the whole grand scheme of things. Other municipalities, however, may sometimes closed meetings are recorded. So there is a record of the meeting, but it is not publicly distributed. And should there ever be any type of complaint or concern or whatever, there is a record of the discussion. And it could be referenced in particular to that particular complaint if that's what that was about. But it's, it does make having a frank discussion, respectful and frank discussion, of course, more comfortable.
I also wonder sometimes if in mincing words and being very careful, being very aware, we're not taking longer with the deliberations. Like, we're not able to just jump right to the point. And I feel like that does a disservice to everybody involved. So
I concur. I think we're all on the same page with that. And I know that there are even other subcommittees and task forces within the city that have taken that more respectful route, still keeping transparency, still having some records, but most of those subjective discussions happen off camera because they want to be able to use names and they want to be able to say possibly hard truths or possibly great things, but in a respectful way without hurting anyone's feelings or ruining relationships.
well, that's right. And we have other we have other paradigms where, like for the award that we just looked at, we were able to go into closed session to talk about that. And I know it's because we want to keep it a surprise, but also just like keeping information confidential. I'm so sorry. My dogs are really excited about cultural policy.
Sorry, I was listening. I'm loving this.
Just trying to keep it chill over here while
I've noted the concerns as mentioned here. For anybody who's listening, watching, this has been a conversation we've had, I think, openly many times at Cultural Vitality Committee meetings over the years. Between the group of us and everybody who's watching, I guess. I had somebody who was formerly a CVC member reach out and let me know that they had contact with some municipal representatives in Sudbury, and this is not the process they use. So we have to have something specific to point to in a northern municipality, which I'm happy to be able to bring forward to clerks and to my manager and move forward from there. So I'm hoping that will make some changes happen here as well. I agree. As a former member of the committee and now being a staff resource, I fully agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, even the way we've had to approach discussions about applications had to fundamentally change so much. The reason why we now only review kind of outliers is because it felt like we were just rubber stamping. I like this application. I like this application. I like this application, right? It was we couldn't have a full discussion on maybe some of the great things about it and some of the not so great things about every application.
Donna, can you remind me about the Green Committee? How are those applications for that fund reviewed? Are they reviewed openly as well?
We do the same thing, which is we receive the applications. Committee members receive the application. All committee members receive the applications in advance. We have a grid and a criteria and a worksheet that we fill out. That is submitted to the coordinator. The coordinator summarizes just like we do. And then as part of the meeting agenda, there is on each of, we have, sometimes we have one or two, and sometimes we've had 4 or 5, depends. And we would, written there is an overall, like a description of the project itself, a brief. And then there's any comments that have been provided by committee members within the worksheet that they did are highlighted there. So if somebody says, sometimes people will say things like, I'm not in favor of fully funding this application. Perhaps we could look at for these reasons or whatever. So those comments are not attributed to anyone. They are simply listed. And then we have a discussion on each one. It is a little bit different because it is, and we have had in the past some extremely uncomfortable conversations. But they are done in public. But I do see this as a little I see those as somewhat or very actually different. There's typically no intellectual property. There's no creative secrets or creative ideas that are being shared widely publicly. They're very functional things. We want to plant a garden at Eastview School, which I went to the other day. This was one from a while ago, which I went to the other day, and there was this beautiful little forest there with the funkiest water recovery system. It had a little solar thing on there and rain barrels and hoses, so the water, it was very cool. Sorry to digress, but anyways, it's not personal. There have been some uncomfortable things, mind you, that have been discussed openly, but anyway, I think you get the gist.
For sure. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something else like in passing. I know that, sorry, because you referenced earlier that there are different committees that go into open. I won't say too much. I think there are committees where members are compensated for their time for these types of evaluations as well.
Not all of them.
One of them in particular I'm thinking of.
Okay, I know one of them isn't.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to say that the tourism board in particular, because it's made up of hoteliers and representatives of the tourism industry, technically those funds aren't city dollars. They're collected, but they're not essentially from our budget. They don't have to be in open for those conversations.
Yeah, I was thinking of, oh my gosh, I can't even, the community awards,
Yes. Was it the Community Recognition Award?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they go into closed.
And the thing is, like, as we're talking about personal information about individuals potentially who are applying for these, I can't see how that doesn't apply there as well. But anyway, and having the resolution in open or discussion about why these were the best applications or of this group, I would like to do that openly versus discuss the merits of all of them, depending. But anyway, I will look further into this as we move forward.
Thank you.
I'm part of the Medal of Merit committee, and we have our discussions in closed.
I just feel like art is so personal in a way that so many other things aren't. That this makes sense to not be judging our peers and what have you. But we've been down this road. We've talked about this.
The intellectual property argument, though, is also really profound, as well as what is the goal? The goal is to encourage possibly emerging artists, and what could be more discouraging than having your art or your lack of experience or whatever kind of openly torn apart, or your lack of ability to write your first grant application or whatever, right?
And then broadcast
to the city. Mind you, at the end of the day, like, the feedback could just simply be, you know what, this is just an emerging artist, they're not quite ready, but this was a good first grant application or good first kick at the can.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to get your feedback from a person as opposed to a public record. I think too, when we're trying to encourage relationships to build the sector out, hearing somebody be critical, that can actually cause divisions and disruptions, and it doesn't really work to anybody's benefit that way. I also, getting back to just providing and reviewing the data that we need, those agenda packages are mighty, to say the least, and the amount of work that needs to be done to update things even between meetings, because they're often stretched out across meetings, is significant for city staff. And they're just like intense to leaf through. So all of those things.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Miranda, did you cover all of your comments that you had?
I think that there might have been one more thing. Let me just see if I can find it quickly. I know that it's hidden someplace in my comments, and Alicia will get them. But I also just want to mention exclusions for all ineligible. Where is it here? To add the bullet point, if the application is incomplete, under the exclusions for all grant streams piece on page 4. So an application may be considered ineligible if the application is incomplete.
Yep.
And like I said, I think there was something else, Alicia, but you will find it in my comments. And yeah,
I'm laughing.
apologies, I can't index it properly right now for you.
That's okay. Actually, I'm just looking at page 4, the last bullet. It seems like I missed a bullet, but it's there. The last sentence of the last bullet is the grant application must be complete and submitted on time to be considered. I don't love the way that reads, but I mean, generally, we need to say that. Just I don't like. There's some language in here that I want to make flow better, and that's all of that is. So thank you for noting that. I'll pop that out for sure.
Yeah. Also, in the exclusions, well, it was kind of alluded to in various parts, like if it doesn't support the city's cultural plan, I would like to just see right off the top, if it does not support arts and culture development within Algoma District or serving the population of the city of Sault Ste. Marie or something to that effect. Because based off of some of the criteria, because we didn't have that right in there, it was more ambiguous for, I believe there was like a application for a Windsor event or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
And I get it. These applicants are searching for any possible applicable grant. But I think we just have to be point blank that if it doesn't serve or encourage people in our area to partake in art or come to an event in our area, that's not where city funding should go.
But further to that, Lee, and everyone, should it say, or does it already say, that your organization must exist within the District of Algoma? Because I don't know if we're talking about the same application or thinking about the same one, but my recollection is there was an organization that wanted to do something in Sault Ste. Marie,
another one.
right?
Yeah.
Right. So not only does it have to benefit the how, as you described it, but that it would be an organization or in the case of a small project grant, a person who resides in the District of Algoma, if that's what we're saying. And if that makes sense.
That for a second, because there was some really good discussion that happened, and I believe, not to call a specific application of mine, but I think it was something about the Ukrainian festival. And I think I'm hesitant because sometimes other communities are doing something great and then they want to bring that same thing into the community, and they're not quite ready to have the community organization yet because they don't. But then Lee, then the local proponent could do that in partnership with someone else, right? So that there is always a local, and that's what was missing in that application, is that there was no local connection, as in there was no local proponent, there was no letters of support locally or anything. It was an organization from outside. So I don't know. You can figure.
Can I share something? Oh no, I shouldn't. It's probably too much. Never mind. I'm gonna move on.
Can I share something?
Sure.
I don't think it's too much. On page 9, further to this, there are 2 notes. The applicant must be an established and incorporated organization, in this case nonprofit, with arts and culture as its primary mandate based in Sault Ste. Marie. If an organization is based outside of the city, funding may still be granted, provided there's a demonstrated substantial local benefit or involvement. And 2 bullet points down, outline its services with specific deliverables that benefit the residents of Sault Ste. Marie as laid out in the Community Cultural Plan 2019-2024. I think that pertains to operational assistance and operating grants, but that's a definition that could easily be pulled up into the other project grant category as well. And I think it's clearly defined there. And actually that those 2 bullet points could be squished together.
Yep, brilliant. That's an elegant solution. And I just would like that to apply to across the board. It's not just operating, right?
And I think we need to decide if it's Sault Ste. Marie or if it is Algoma, or if it's within a radius of. We don't have to decide that now, just one or the other. Or something. All right. Could we go back before we see what else? We've got about 15 minutes left here. Could we just go back? I wanted to make one comment while we were up at the top here we covered capital, nothing further on capital, correct?
I just look forward to seeing your comments as to which version of that we'd like to go with, or if there's any development of for our own purposes of this. That's where I look for that information, then we can kind of discuss.
The capital definition.
Yeah, we said like that'll be captured in notes later on, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, that's for my benefit, not for yours to say that out loud. Sorry.
Okay. I just have one question about operating costs. So this definition of operating costs, I don't know where it came. Oh, here it is. Oh, is this a Canada Council operating cost definition? The whole thing, all those bullet points?
Yes.
I personally do not understand how depreciation is an operating cost, because they don't. So I mean, I'm okay at accounting. I may not be an expert, but I don't understand why we would give money for those types of. There is no cost to depreciation. It is a non-cash expense. So maybe I just need to read more about why that particular item is included in that list of things.
And just to mention too, it's a good working definition, but if there are items in it that we don't necessarily support or agree with, I'm assuming that we could prune those out. And also just to say, for all the arts nonprofits that I know of, it's only the really big ones that seems to me that track depreciation and amortization. And perhaps they are part of the field that we're funding and perhaps not. Including something like this could also just increase anxiety for organizations that don't know what it is and feel like they need to suddenly know what it is and deal with it. But it's a huge piece to track, and often the capacity at these organizations just isn't there to do it. Speaking from experience.
Well, the other thing would be, Miranda, and everybody here will appreciate this, you'd have to have an asset in order to have something to depreciate.
Yeah.
So, for people who are renting space and so on, you don't have, outside of perhaps technological equipment, there's not a lot of things in the asset category usually for organizations.
Oh no, my stapler depreciated by 3% this year.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and maybe strike that piece, and we can all review in the notes any other thoughts that you might have about that one.
Okay, so if there's nothing further on that, then what else would you like? Have we done as much as we can do for today without starting something that we can't finish, or what?
I had one other comment that I was hoping we could discuss before we finish up. And it seems harsh because I'm really zeroing in on these exclusions. But I view exclusions as a nice way for city staff, in this case being Ally, to be able to go, nope. They don't even get to committee. If they're excluded, they don't meet. They fall into any of these categories. They don't. I think it should be a part of the process, because I've seen some pretty funky financials that we look up CRA reports. And not necessarily we as but maybe as part of that review process. I don't know if it fits under exclusion or review process, and pull the most recent financials. And if there is inaccuracies or hidden information that was within the application that doesn't match, they're automatically excluded. Yeah, and that's just, this is my commerce brain taking over right now. There were some submitted applications that they're supposed to provide the most recent fiscal year's financials, and they were submitting strategically 2, 3, 4-year-old financials. And I was going, am I even supposed to be looking at this? Because this is.
So the part of the issue with those types of pieces in the past has been, it's the most up-to-date financials that you can have, basically, has been the wording. Yes, you want the most current ones, but with the different annual year end of years, it's really hard to get everybody on the same page, I guess is the point. So individually looking at, if we're looking at 30 applications, well, it's usually 15 applications that might actually have financials. It's been really challenging in the past couple of years. It wasn't so in the beginning, to my knowledge. I'm not sure what has changed. We talked about the time of year, the submissions, and how that's supposed to align with different intakes in different fiscal years, and how it doesn't have to. We can, at the committee level, you guys can go ahead and to deploy the funds and disperse the funds as required. That's fine. But ultimately, it makes things really inconsistent, and so it's been more challenging on the back end for that.
But even then, we're talking about maximum 12 to 15 months. Which means if we're getting financials that are older than 15 months, they're skirting the process. They should be automatically excluded, and we should be double checking their CRA.
So this would only be relevant to incorporated not-for-profit charitable, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I know from other grant applications, and we could put a timeline on it, I would think that 6 months would be a very reasonable, a state or whatever they call note to reader statement or whatever they're called these days. And we don't need to say audited financial statement, because that brings in a whole other level of whatever. But I mean, there is a terminology for it. We could find that. Otherwise, ask for internals. Like, that is completely normal. I was working on something a few weeks ago. It was the same thing. You want your year end. You have X time after your year end to be able to provide that. So if your year end is December and you're applying for a grant in October, and you're telling us that you don't have your latest a note to reader financial statement, well, that's not acceptable, right?
Exactly. And checking out the CRA, at the end of the day, if they're behind or in default with the CRA, we should not be looking at them. Absolutely not.
Right now, it says essentially that, sorry, if you're looking at exclusions, I think this is probably maybe like sort of the conversation is stemming from, is if we're in arrears, essentially, if that person or organization's in arrears with the city in some capacity, tax payments must be maintained and up to date, blah, blah, blah. We have this internalized ability to check that here. We don't, again, like, that doesn't indicate it elsewhere. So I'm not opposed to that. I wonder if there's any legitimacy in asking for these groups to submit their financials after upon the report, their final report as well. I wonder if there's any relevance to that in that time. It just seems to be something that I could easily do on the back end as well, as part of reporting requirements, and then we also then have them.
Suggestion. So suggestion is submit your most recent audited financial statements, notice to reader, whatever. If you're waiting for your most recently completed fiscal year reports, send us the interim internal documents, and then provide those incoming statements upon availability or upon request, and or with submission of final report.
Could I make another suggestion? Why don't we just not ask for it at all? If there's a check mark that says I'm an incorporated nonprofit organization, why don't we just check ourselves?
Because of the timing
of the CRA.
Because of the timing, because CRA doesn't get your financial statement until, like, so for example, if it's 6 months after, right? So if your year end is December, then you don't have to file your charitable return until just June 30th. So they're not even going, so depending on where it falls, is going to depend on what would be there or not be there. You know what I mean?
Fair.
I don't want to take us too far off this, but knowing that we've got about 4 minutes, I just wanted to bring your attention to something. Sorry. there was something I wanted you to take a look at. If it's okay with you, I'd like you to take a look or start to think about the same way that we're talking about, thinking about a couple different pieces here with the rubrics, interim reporting and final reports. Right now, interim reports, we don't have anything official. We don't have, the communication is ultimately to inform staff that you are in the process of applying for this. Obviously, I know who is in arrears on their reporting, and where that goes. A couple different things. And the final report is a little bit lax. I don't mind. I like the timeline here of 120 days post-project to completion. I think that might be even a little bit long. Some people have 60 or 90 days, but I don't mind our 120 days after the project has completed to provide a final report. But that being said, if you were to go to saultmarie.ca/ACAP and look at the final report form, it's a little bit lesser. And I'm not sure that we're capturing the right data there too. So as we're talking about making these changes here, the final report doesn't go to council for review as part of this package that we're developing here. This is just something I'd like you to keep in mind as we start to move forward.
I like that. Have we ever done a holdback amount for the final report so that it diminishes how many people are in arrears?
So that's kind of the thing. We haven't. And the way that this fund works is that ultimately, so just as per what happened this week at council approved the Arts and Culture Assistance Program grants. Internally, we wait for the resolution to come down from clerks. We send over the finance information, and then it's paid out to applicants through check or EFT in advance of activities. So that's not totally typical with other groups. And I like that we are able to do that because I believe that by withholding funds like that, that typically groups wouldn't be able to complete their activities as proposed if you don't give them to upfront.
Fair.
So I'm happy with that, and I would not like to review that. But at the same time,
hey, that's your job to follow up with them. So if it was an arrears issue, a constant arrears issues, they're not having good final reports, then it could be considered. But if that's not an issue, then why make it one?
And I go back to historical details from the committee was back, I think was it 2020 or 2021, with the Arts Council in particular, they put in a pretty significant request and basically didn't provide any of the relevant information that was required for the request. And then beyond that, we also didn't have the report in from the previous year, so they were not approved. So that's how we typically have dealt with it here. You're not approved for more until you're back up with your reporting. But there aren't really any consequences at this time. Not that I'm looking for them, but there aren't any real consequences to putting in your report late either. So if you go past 120 days, that might be noted on a spreadsheet, but beyond that, like as long as they're not applying for other grant immediately, there's no concern there. So yeah, so something to think about. I'm not sure how other groups deal with this. And I'm not really one for imposing consequences. If it's 121 days versus 120 days, like that doesn't matter.
Yeah,
the reporting is solid and fine, but it's something that needs attention. But again, as we review this whole process, and I've been talking a lot now, so.
And Donna had to go away.
Yeah.
I do have to go. So if there's nothing further for today, Alicia, I'm sure you will organize our next meeting, and thank you for all the good the basis for our discussions. It's great. If there's nothing further, which there can't be because I do have to go, could I have a mover and a seconder to adjourn our meeting today? Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Miranda. All in favor? That is carried. We will come together again next time and work more on this. Thank you, everyone.